"You can sit here," the man said, sliding a few inches to the left on the cold metal bench as dusk settled over Riverside Park. The bench creaked softly. Dry leaves scraped across the concrete path, pushed by a slow wind that smelled like wet grass and car exhaust. The woman hesitated before sitting, holding the boy close to her side. The child's sneakers were mismatched, one lace dragging against the ground, tapping lightly with each step. The man unscrewed the lid of his thermos. Steam escaped in a thin line, disappearing into the dim orange glow of the park lights. He poured soup into the small plastic cup attached to the lid, his hands steady, practiced, as if he had done this many times before. The boy watched every movement without blinking. A swing creaked behind them. Somewhere near the playground, a chain rattled, then went still. The city hummed beyond the trees, distant horns blending with the low rumble of traffic. The woman murmured something too quiet to hear. The man nodded once, not looking at her. He handed the cup to the boy first. The child wrapped both hands around it, shoulders relaxing as the warmth reached his fingers. A faint breath left his mouth, almost a sigh. The man broke a piece of bread in half. The crust cracked sharply in the quiet. He kept the larger piece in his hand for a moment, then switched them without comment and passed it over. The boy took it carefully, crumbs falling onto his jacket. For a few seconds, no one spoke. The soup sloshed softly as the child lifted the cup. The park lights flickered once, then steadied. The man stared straight ahead, jaw tight, as if the bench might disappear if he acknowledged what was happening. His knee bounced once, then stopped. Behind them, the last of the daylight slipped away, leaving only the bench, the soup, and the sound of a child eating in the growing dark. He jogged the same cracked path through Riverside Park every night, always at the same hour, always at the same pace. Not because he loved running, but because it gave him a reason to arrive home later. The apartment waited for him in silence. Too clean, too still, the kind of quiet that pressed against the chest instead of resting there. During the day, he worked, spoke when spoken to, packed his lunch with mechanical care. At night, he moved. Motion kept certain thoughts from catching up. If he stopped, if he slowed down too much, they had a way of surfacing, small, sharp memories that didn't need words to hurt. He told himself the routine was healthy. Fresh air. Exercise. A way to clear the head. But deep down, he knew why he always took the long route through the park, why he sat on the same bench afterward, breathing hard, staring at the playground after the children were gone. It was easier to face empty swings than an empty couch. There were things he didn't let himself feel anymore. Not fully. Grief, yes, but only in controlled doses. Longing, never. Hope felt dangerous, like something that asked for more than he could give. He had learned, quietly, to keep his world small. Predictable. Safe from sudden losses. The park understood that kind of silence. The lights came on without ceremony. The paths accepted tired footsteps without questions. No one here expected him to be more than what he was. If you've ever stretched to walk, taken the long way home, or filled your evenings with noise just to avoid a certain kind of quiet, you already know this feeling. Some stories don't begin with big moments. They begin with the things we do to protect ourselves, without even realizing it. That night, as he slowed near the bench, breathing steady, he thought it would be like any other. Just another lap. Just another evening safely spent not feeling too much. He had just capped the thermos when he noticed them standing a few steps away, half hidden by the shadow of a maple tree. The woman shifted her weight from one foot to the other, as if unsure whether to leave or stay. The boy's eyes stayed fixed on the bench, then on the thermos, then quickly down at his shoes. The man told himself to look away. He had already finished his run. His legs were cooling, sweat drying against his skin. Home was waiting. Or rather, the absence of anything waiting. The woman took a small step forward. "Sorry," she said, her voice thin, almost apologetic. "He's cold." The boy didn't speak. He hugged his arms to his chest, shoulders drawn up, nose red from the evening air. A playground slide clanged softly as the wind pushed it back and forth. The man's first instinct was to stand, to nod, to move on. He wasn't equipped for this. He had learned, over time, that involvement had a cost. It always did. But the thermos was still warm in his hands. He looked at the cup attached to the lid. He looked at the bench. The space beside him felt suddenly deliberate, as if it had been left open on purpose. "You can sit here," he heard himself say. The words surprised him. They sounded casual, harmless. He slid over, the metal bench cold even through his clothes. The woman hesitated, then sat, keeping a careful distance. He unscrewed the lid again. Steam rose, faint but real. He poured the soup slowly, not filling the cup all the way. The smell, chicken, salt, something simple, spread between them. The boy's eyes lifted. Just for a second. "It's still hot," the man said, placing the cup between them on the bench. He told himself it was nothing. Just soup. Just a few minutes. He could leave right after. But as the boy wrapped his hands around the cup, the man felt something shift inside him. Small, quiet, and already impossible to undo. They began to meet without ever agreeing to it. After sunset, when the park thinned out and the sky turned a dull blue-gray, the man slowed his jog near the playground. He told himself it was coincidence. The path curved that way anyway. The bench was there. The swings were there. Some nights, so were they. The woman arrived first most evenings, sitting on the low concrete edge near the swing set. The boy traced lines in the dirt with a stick, dragging it back and forth between his sneakers. When the man approached, he never waved. He never called out. He simply nodded once, as if acknowledging a routine he wasn't ready to name. He brought the thermos again. Not always full. Sometimes half. He told himself it was practical. No sense carrying extra weight. Still, he found himself filling it a little more carefully on those nights. They ate quietly. The boy sat on the swing, feet barely brushing the ground, cup balanced between his hands. Each time he took a sip, the swing creaked forward and back in short, careful arcs. The sound settled into the background like breathing. Some nights, the woman spoke. Small things. That the air felt colder earlier now. That the park lights flickered near the bathrooms. Other nights, she said nothing at all. Silence stretched between them, not uncomfortable, but fragile. The kind that could snap if handled wrong. Once, the boy spilled soup onto his jacket. He froze, eyes wide, as if waiting to be scolded. The man reacted too quickly, reaching for the sleeve before thinking. The woman stiffened. For a moment, no one moved. "It's fine," the man said, pulling his hand back. "It'll dry." The boy nodded, though his lip trembled. He wiped the stain with the edge of his sleeve, then took another sip, slower this time. The man noticed his own heart racing, as if he had nearly crossed a line he didn't know existed. Trust came in small tests. A question left unanswered. A glance held too long. The woman sometimes checked her phone and looked toward the path that led out of the park, counting time in ways the man didn't ask about. He learned where not to sit, so the swing wouldn't bump his knee. He learned the boy liked the soup thicker, with fewer vegetables. He learned not to offer help unless it was asked for. The routine settled in quietly. Meet. Sit. Eat. Leave. And yet, every night, as they stood to go, the man felt the same unease. A thin thread pulling tight inside his chest. He didn't know what would happen if one evening they didn't show up. On the fifth night, as the boy hopped off the swing, A car engine coughed to life beyond the trees. Headlights flashed through the park, briefly illuminating the woman's face. The man followed her gaze, and for the first time, noticed where she was really looking. The man no longer jogged past the playground. He walked now, slowing his steps as soon as the swing set came into view. Some nights he arrived before them and waited, standing near the fence, pretending to stretch. Other nights they were already there, the boys sitting on the swing, legs tucked in, twisting the chains around themselves. Without asking, the man stepped behind the swing and placed his hands on the cold metal links. "Ready?" he said, then stopped himself. He didn't need to ask. He gave the swing a gentle push. Not high, not fast, just enough to start a rhythm. The boy began to count under his breath. 1, 2, 3. The numbers were soft, almost swallowed by the night. The man matched his movements to the counting, pushing at the same point each time, careful not to break the pattern. The woman sat nearby on the low wall, thermos resting beside her now, as if it belonged there. On colder evenings, the man draped his jacket over the back of the swing when the boys stood up to eat. He didn't comment on it. He didn't watch to see if the woman noticed. When he took it back, it smelled faintly of soup and playground dust. Small things began to shift. The boy stopped flinching when the swing slowed too suddenly. He leaned back without checking if the man was still there. Once, when the counting reached 10, he laughed, a quick sound, surprised, as if he hadn't meant to let it out. The man felt that laugh settle somewhere deep in his chest. They spoke less now. Words seemed unnecessary. The woman trusted the man to keep an eye on the boy while she stepped away to take a call near the trees. The man trusted that she would come back. Each time she did. One evening, the boy scraped his knee climbing onto the swing. He sucked in a sharp breath, eyes filling. Before the man could think, he crouched down, unscrewed the water bottle from his bag, and rinsed the dirt away. He tore a strip from a clean cloth he carried and pressed it gently against the skin. The woman watched, hands clenched in her coat pockets. The boy sniffed, then nodded. "It's okay," he said, as if reassuring all of them. They stayed longer after that. The park lights buzzed overhead. A dog barked somewhere beyond the path. The man checked his watch and didn't move. He began to notice how the boy leaned into him when the swing stopped, how the woman exhaled when the thermos was empty, how all three of them lingered at the edge of goodbye. That night, as they finally stood to leave, the boy tugged lightly on the man's sleeve and pointed past the trees. The car was there again, parked with its lights off, waiting in the dark. The car sat behind the public library, half hidden by a row of overgrown bushes and a chain-link fence that had begun to rust at the edges. It wasn't broken. It wasn't abandoned. It was simply still, parked too carefully for too long. The man noticed it properly the first night he followed them at a distance, keeping his footsteps slow, unannounced. The woman unlocked the driver's door quietly. The boy climbed into the back seat without complaint, curling his legs beneath him as if the space had been shaped for that purpose. No one rushed. That was what struck him most. The woman folded a thin blanket and handed it back to the boy. The man watched her tuck the edges in, smoothing the fabric along the door panel with practiced motions. She checked the windows. 1, 2, 3. Locked. Safe enough. The boy leaned forward between the seats. "Did I count right today?" he asked. "Yes," she said. "You always do." The man stepped back before they could see him. He stood in the shadow of the library wall, the bricks cold against his shoulder. The building loomed quiet and closed, its dark windows reflecting a version of him he didn't recognize. Hands in pockets, breath shallow, chest tight. The evenings in the park replayed themselves in his mind, rearranged. The careful way the woman watched the path. the way the boy treated the swing like something temporary. The thermos accepted without surprise. The gratitude held back, controlled. It hadn't been about food. Not really. It had been about warmth. About not being invisible for an hour at the end of the day. He thought of his own apartment. The spare garage beneath it, empty except for boxes he never unpacked. The light he left on at night, more habit than need. The next evening, he didn't wait for them to speak. He walked beside them toward the library, footsteps matching theirs. The woman tensed, just slightly. He stopped at the edge of the parking lot. "There's a space," he said, nodding toward the street without naming it. "Covered." She didn't answer right away. The boy looked between them, fingers tied around his jacket zipper. "It locks," the man added. His voice was steady, but his hands weren't. He tucked them into his pockets. "You can use it." The woman studied his face, searching for something he wasn't offering. No explanations, no conditions. Just the space. The boy spoke first. "Is it warm?" The man swallowed. "Yes." The woman nodded once. As they drove away, the man remained where he was, watching the taillights disappear. He felt exposed, as if he had stepped into something he could no longer step back from. That night, standing alone in his apartment, he stared at the garage key resting on the counter. He realized he wasn't afraid of losing his routine anymore. He was afraid of what would happen if he didn't choose differently. The next evening, the man didn't jog at all. He left work earlier than usual, the decision made quietly between one breath and the next. The spare garage key felt heavier in his pocket than it should have, its edges pressing against his thigh as he walked. He didn't rehearse what he would say. He knew better than that. Words would only get in the way. They were already waiting near the library when he arrived. The boy sat on the low curb, swinging his legs, counting under his breath as cars passed. The woman stood beside him, arms crossed, watching the entrance of the building as if expecting to be told to leave. The man stopped a few feet away. He didn't smile. He didn't rush. He reached into his pocket and held out the key, resting it in his open palm. The metal caught the streetlight, dull but solid. "It's the one on the right," he said. "The light works." That was all. The woman didn't take it at first. Her eyes moved from the key to his face, then back again. She seemed to be measuring the space between them, the distance he was allowing her to keep. The boy slid off the curb and stepped closer. He looked at the key, then up at the man. "Can we leave the swing there?" he asked, as if the park itself might disappear overnight. "Yes," the man said. "It'll be there." That seemed to be enough. The woman reached out and closed her fingers around the key. She didn't say thank you. She nodded once, the way someone does when they are holding themselves together carefully. The man walked them to the garage entrance without touching either of them. He unlocked the metal door and stepped aside, letting them enter first. The light flicked on, revealing clean concrete, a single empty space, and a shelf stacked with unopened boxes. The boy let go of his mother's hand and walked inside, footsteps echoing. He spun once, slow and deliberate, as if testing whether the place would stay. "It smells like soap," he said. The man nodded. He had cleaned it that afternoon without realizing why. He handed the woman a folded blanket he had brought from upstairs, then stepped back again. He didn't explain how long they could stay. He didn't need to. As he closed the door behind them, he felt something settle in his chest. Not relief, not pride, but a quiet certainty. He wasn't rescuing anyone. He was making room. He stood in the alley for a moment longer, listening. On the other side of the door, a child's footsteps slowed. A voice counted softly. 1, 2, 3. The man rested his hand against the cool metal, then turned toward the street, already knowing he wouldn't be running past the park tomorrow night. The evening settled into Riverside Park without announcement, the way it always did. The lights along the path clicked on one by one, casting soft circles onto the ground. Crickets filled the spaces between distant cars and quiet voices. They sat at the picnic table beneath the largest lamp, the wood worn smooth by years of use. A paper bag rested in the center, open just enough to release the smell of warm food. Nothing special. Soup in plastic containers. Bread wrapped in napkins. Simple things that didn't ask to be noticed. The boy climbed onto the bench and swung his legs, counting softly, as he always did, his voice barely rising above the night sounds. The man sat across from him, unscrewing lids, sliding plates closer without thinking. The woman unfolded a napkin and smoothed it flat, then paused, watching the two of them for a moment longer than necessary. They ate without hurry. A breeze passed through the trees, carrying the familiar scent of grass and pavement. The swings nearby stood empty, chains motionless. The man leaned back slightly, listening, feeling the weight of the day leave his shoulders in small increments. No one spoke about the garage. No one mentioned tomorrow. The routine had shifted, quietly, into something new. Something that fit. When the boy finished eating, he wiped his mouth with the back of his hand and rested his head against the edge of the table. His eyes drifted closed for a second, then opened again. 5, he whispered, finishing his count. The man smiled, just a little, the expression unfamiliar, but not uncomfortable. He gathered the empty containers, stacking them neatly, the way he always did. If this story felt close to you, if you've ever found comfort in an ordinary moment that meant more than it should, there will always be more quiet evenings like this to share. The park lights hummed steadily above them. The table held their weight without complaint. For the first time in a long while, the man didn't feel the need to leave when the night grew still.